Thank you, Brooks, for meeting us out here on site at the Parker Lane United Methodist Church.
My pleasure, thank you.
We're super excited at Foundation Communities to build this new family apartment community. Maybe share a little bit about the church's perspective when this congregation closed and you were figuring out what to do with the land.
Sure. Obviously, when the future of the church was in doubt, we just had to make a decision to close it, unfortunately. The typical default for the United Methodist Church is just to sell the property. We thought that this property was too big of a resource to just sell. And second, Parker Lane has a long history of presence and service to this neighborhood, and we wanted to try to figure out a way to continue that legacy, to continue their service to others, even though they're no longer physically here.
How do you think the folks who attended church here at Parker Lane would feel about Foundation Communities and this project?
I hope they're very proud of it. I hope that it's very in sync with what they did here, and I hope that they will continue to believe in the work that we're doing here.
I think it was about 2 years ago when you approached us about this possibility. Part of the deal on the land was volunteers for the food pantry and the after-school program, and the immigration attorneys, and maybe a Methodist nurse. Can you talk a little bit about what you all hope happens in the future?
Sure. I mean, one of the very important parts of us choosing Foundation Communities is that your wraparound services are very much in line with what our churches do, right? I mean, as part of this project, there's going to be a huge after-school program. Many, if not most, of our churches also involved in local schools doing similar kind of work. You're going to have a food pantry. Many of our churches do food pantries. And so we hope that there's synergy there. So, I mean, we chose you because we like what you do in addition to the affordable housing. And in a perfect world, we'll be able to supply volunteers to come and help continue those services here. We're going to, as part of our negotiations, we have a presence here. We'll keep office space here. We'll have access to the community room in the complex, and we want to continue serving the neighborhood in many of the same ways that Parker Lane was able to serve them in the past.
It was a hard negotiation because this is exactly what we want, is volunteers and community engagement. Can you share a few things? We're excited about the Justice for Our Neighbors program. They've been in the old church building and they need a new home. Can you speak to their work?
Yeah, so Justice for Our Neighbors is a United Methodist-based immigration clinic. And so I can't tell you how many years ago, but a few years ago, a small team of us, me and a couple of other people, brought Justice for Our Neighbors to Austin and opened the clinic. And basically the clinic offers free or no-cost legal services to immigrants coming into the United States and seeking legal status. And so for the last couple of years, it has been longer than that actually, it's been in the Parker Lane, it's been housed in Parker Lane. And what we envision and hope it'll continue to be is, once this project is up and going, that perhaps the office space could house the Justice for Our Neighbor clinic then.
I think the number one question that people have asked about this project when we put the word out that we were going to build here was, what about the old church buildings and the stuff in the church buildings? You want to share any thoughts about that?
Well, I have thoughts about both. Unfortunately, the old church buildings are not at a point where it's economical to use them. In fact, when we had Justice for Our Neighbors in there, the kinds of issues we're dealing with are, how do we get rid of the rats that keep eating through the internet cables? There are some assets in the building that we want to continue to use. There is some beautiful stained glass that we were going to hopefully use in the new building, if we can make that transition with everything not breaking. And some of the other stuff we're trying to rehome. Maybe some of the pews, we're looking at the organ, but we're not the only church closing, and there are several of those that are being offered, but we're going to try to reutilize some of those assets as best we can.
Yeah, we're really committed at Foundation Communities to salvage everything that makes sense, and sadly the buildings are they're in rough shape, so they're going to come down, but we'll find a new life for the pews and the windows.
One of the things that we hope to come out of this is a model, right? Parker Lane is not the only church that being closed. And so one thing that we're trying to do is, how can we use our assets to continue serving the neighborhood? Hopefully there are mistakes that we can learn from and advantages that we can learn from on this project. And I think that Also, it doesn't have to be a church closing. I mean, we have a number of churches both here locally and really around the country that have a significant amount of property that can be developed without the church having to close, that they could do it on their own. And so that's a conversation that we've tried to spark and that I think is being sparked. We have local resources here through a group called Texas Methodist Foundation, which doesn't just serve the Texas church, but it serves the global church. And we're talking about them is how can we take this and make it a turnkey process so that it can be done throughout the country to help use our resources to continue to serve neighborhoods in outside the box ways. And that is a huge goal, I think, that and a consequence of this, aside from the project that we get on this ground physically.
Yeah, I think this is a model. There are other churches with land, whether they're closed or still open. And one thing we're really grateful for about Parker Lane, this is a great central location. There's great bus service and access to jobs and schools and HEB, and to find 8 acres in a central location like this to serve families is amazing.
It's a beautiful property. It's got a lot of trees. It's got a wildflower garden in the front. It does make building harder in Austin when you have this many trees, but I think it is overall an asset for us. One of the things that attracted us to Foundation Communities was its commitment to families. So some people we talked about were going to do affordable housing, but they would kind of try to cram as many units in it as possible, meaning a lot of studios and 1-bedrooms because that's more profitable. But it's obviously limits of what you can do. Most of this project will be 2- and 3-bedroom family apartments so that it will cater to families. And so we're able to provide a beautiful spot where these families can come and live in really a spot that's kind of unique to in much ways downtown of Austin. I mean, you're not going to, I don't think, find very similar close areas this close to downtown that has this kind of green space and outdoorsy feelings that you would get in downtown.
It's hard to live in Austin now because it's so expensive and not know families from church, from school, from the supermarket that need an affordable place to live and just a little bit of support. And thank you for the partnership with the church to create that opportunity here.
Yeah, well, it is our pleasure, and like I said, we all owe it all to the Parker Lane people that have, been devoted for so many decades and allowed this to be a possibility as we go forward.